Hey everybody, this is Mr. Hussey with the Joy of Music School. Thank you for joining us for our fourth lesson in our series in understanding the symbols of music. For today's lesson, we're going to be learning how to count rhythm using our musical note and rest symbols that we've been studying in our previous lessons. Let's go ahead and get started for the day. So as we've looked at in our other lesson videos, we've been making sure that you all are starting to recognize these note and these rest symbols. And so we've been using a table that looks something kind of like this to help you all remember. But for today's lesson, what we really want to make sure that you all understand is that we're starting to recognize how many beats or how many counts these note and rest symbols are going to be worth. I know that when I see a whole note, I've got to make sound with my voice or my instrument for 4 whole beats. A half note means I've got to make sound for 2 beats. A quarter note, 1 beat, an eighth note, a half a beat, and a 16th note's a really fast quarter beat. Now our rest symbols are telling us when to be quiet, but they're telling us to be quiet for the same number of beats as our respective note symbols. So a whole rest means we've got to be quiet for 4 beats. A half rest means we've got to be quiet for 2 beats. A quarter rest, 1 beat of silence. Eighth note, half a beat of silence. And a 16th note, a quarter beat of silence. Now, you've been doing some activities where you've been practicing being able to count these different types of note symbols and being able to add up the number of beats that you see with the grouping of note and rest symbols that you've been given. That's what we really want to make sure that you're able to do with being able to count correctly the beats so that you're going to be able to understand the rhythms when we see these notes in our music. Now, when we talk about these note and rest symbols, and we're trying to understand how many counts and how many beats that they're going to be worth, sometimes it's helpful to see another little diagram that helps us understand exactly how many beats of sound those different symbols are going to be worth. So if you would, take a look at the screen right here, and let me show you something that might help us to be able to understand how these different types of note symbols are going to be held out for long counts of time, or they might be held out for very short counts or very short periods of time. So on the screen here, you can see on my very top line, I have one little whole note right here on my top line. And I can see that when I see a whole note that's written in my music, I've got to make sure that I'm going to hold it out for 4 whole beats. So if I were counting that rhythm, I'd know that I'd have to count 1, 2, 3, 4. That duration of time of 4 beats, that's going to be how long that sound would be for that whole note. Now, if I look at my second line, I see that I've got 2 half notes. And if we remember, the half note is worth 2 beats. So my first half note would get count 1 and count 2, and that would represent its 2 beats. And then my next half note right here would get beat 3 and beat 4, my next 2 beats in that particular line of music that I see right here. Now, when I start getting down into some faster moving notes, like my quarter notes that I see on my third line, each one of my quarter notes is worth 1 beat. So if I'm looking at my 4 quarter notes, I know that my first quarter note gets beat 1, my second quarter note gets beat 2, my third quarter note gets beat 4, and my fourth quarter note gets beat number 4. Now, when we start to get to really fast notes like our eighth notes, they're actually going to be faster beats than just 1 beat at a time. So for every 1 beat of a quarter note, I can actually play 2 eighth notes because they're faster than my quarter note. And sometimes to help us when we're trying to count these faster notes, sometimes when we see our eighth notes, we'll use the little syllable and. so that when I'm counting these eighth notes, I can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and to account for all of the eighth notes that I might see in a line of music. So again, for my quarter notes, they're each going to be worth one beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. But my eighth notes are moving a little bit faster. So I'm going to use that little and syllable whenever I see that second little eighth note that's tied together with a bar to the first eighth note. So these eighth notes would be counted as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, if we were really starting to get some faster notes and we started to look at these 16th notes, in order to be able to understand and count these very, very fast 16th notes that are only worth a quarter beat each, we use the syllables E and A. So for each beat, we have 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. So my eighth notes up here would go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, while my 16th notes down here would sound like this: 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Now this is just the start to helping us understand how to count some of these rhythms. And we've got some tremendous activities for you all to try to practice counting these rhythms, using your different note and rest symbols, and also too, trying to see if you can start to count some of these faster note symbols that we see, like our eighth notes. We're about out of time for today's lesson, but I wanted to thank you all for joining us for our first part of our lesson in trying to be able to count rhythms using our note and rest symbols. We hope to see you all again soon for our next video. Bye-bye.